So tonight is our 9th meeting of the fall, just amazing. And I loved seeing this beautiful photograph of fog in the mountains. I've felt that, and hopefully some of our uh, energy exchange tonight can help clear that. We're going to offer what we're doing tonight as a prayer. And by that, I mean a kind of a lectio divina. Lectio divina means to understand what you're reading as a divine reading. And I've chosen from this week's meditations, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and today from Richard Rohr's Daily Meditations. I was thrilled that he leaned on Parker Palmer and also on Joan Chittister. As I was putting all of this together, I felt, I really want to kind of pray through tonight. And so I'm not so much interested in transmitting cognitive information as inviting you to read or hear these words and let whatever word captures you. Before we go through the Richard Rohr material, when I got in touch with the fact that I would love to offer all of us an instrument for praying through this PowerPoint, I went to my favorite blessing from John O'Donoghue's book, To Bless the Space Between Us. And let's go to that prayer. He has a wonderful blessing for the exhausted. He's got a blessing for everything in that book. I highly recommend this book. And I'm just going to read this quietly and slowly. This is only the second half of the blessing. But so many people, I think, are exhausted right now with what's been going on. So here we go. And I want to quote from another place that he wrote. John O'Donoghue said that stress is about having a distorted relationship with time. And I think that's very worth savoring. And that first sentence is understanding exhaustion as being forced to enter empty time as a way of healing. The desire that drove you has relinquished. There's nothing else to do now but rest and patiently learn to receive the self you have forsaken for the race of days. At first, your thinking will darken and sadness take over like listless weather. The flow of unwept tears will frighten you. You have traveled too fast over false ground. Now your soul has come to take you back. Take refuge in your senses. Open up to all the small miracles you rushed through. Become inclined to watch the way of rain when it falls slow and free. Imitate the habit of twilight, taking time to open the well of color. Taking time to open the well of color that fostered the brightness of day. Draw alongside the silence of stone until its calmness can claim you. Be excessively gentle with yourself. Stay clear of those who are vexed in spirit. Learn to linger around someone of ease who feels that they have all the time in the world. Gradually, you will return to yourself, having learned a new respect for your heart and the joy that dwells far within slow time. Now, before we leave this blessing, I think one of the things that's at stake right now is for each of us and also our nation, and I would add religious communities and any other organizations, learning their true self. and finding a way to return to our true self. That takes time, and that takes silence and solitude. It also takes community. So none of this is either or. It's all both and. I hope that we give ourselves some patience to let every vote get counted and recorded. And for us to find the voice of the heart of our nation. Take time getting there and then move forward. So speaking of moving forward, the next slide is an adaptation of this statement from Cynthia Bourgeault, which has really claimed me. Before I read it, I just want to go to the bottom of this slide. Arundhati Roy has been teaching us about how pandemic is a portal. John Cobb has taught us about how modern civilization is collapsing in our presence and being replaced with ecological civilization. Charles Eisenstein's saying that the story of separateness is totally being replaced with the story of interbeing. Rohr is saying that we are in an elementary school right now in the pandemic, moving from order to disorder to reorder. And Oprah Winfrey called us to a graduation process to our essential work. So having said all, and then Richard Rohr is also saying that in order to rebuild, you have to be rebuilt inside, that the rebuilt inside are those who can offer their energies for the rebuilding of the external structures. So Cynthia Bourgeault really speaks to me when she invites us to go ahead now and live in the laws of the next world, which I would argue are the laws of oneness, big love, and interbeing. And to get the mentality of the great cathedral builders in our mind, knowing that the work we offer right now, we will probably not see completed. That doesn't keep us from offering the work. That old thing about how we now sit in the shade of trees we did not plant, and we plant trees in the shade of which we will never sit. So it's in that service of you letting speak to you any word or phrase or slide tonight that might be calling you to both be healed of your exhaustion to the degree anybody is exhausted, and also to be called to your work on the other side of the election to rebuild the society. Next slide. Now, Richard Rohr likes to talk about the public virtue versus the private virtue. I want to hold up the both and of this. I truly get his critique of seeing Christianity is nothing more than the inner world, and how important it is to connect the inner world with the outer world. I do want to hold up that some of us need to do our inner work as well as cast our eye to the public work. And I love the John Adams quote, "Public virtue cannot exist in a nation without private virtue." And public virtue then is the only foundation of the republic. Next slide. So the whole business of healing the earth is being in solidarity with the earth and with others. I really resonate with Richard Rohr's thing as being non-political. Everything we say or do either affirms or critiques the status quo. Even to say nothing is to say something. I mean, silence is complicity with the status quo. If we say nothing, we communicate that the status quo is apparently okay. So a call for a non-political stance is an illusion, and the powerful have always been able to use that to manipulate people. I remind you of the Third Reich, when people would go to Easter services and come out with ashes falling on their Easter finery, and they're being quiet about that. That was called the movement within Christianity called Quietism. It was the spiritualization of Christianity instead of the both and. So in the third paragraph, what I mean by public virtue is primarily about solidarity with others, that wonderful word with, as opposed to an exclusive concern with my inner life. It's got to be about both being healthy in an inward way and also being called to be in solidarity with others. Next slide. Joan Chittister is just a powerhouse. She is a force of nature. She's Roman Catholic Benedictine sister, theologian, author, and speaker. And she speaks so frequently about the common good and God's will of love. And she is so ebulliently hopeful. And this is a real insight into why she's so hopeful. One thing that stood out and convinced me of the certain triumph of the great human gamble on equality and justice, and that thing that has stood out is that there are people who, despite finding themselves mired in periods of national disruption or personal marginalization, refuse to give up the thought of a better future or to give in to the allurements of a deteriorating present. They never lose hope that the values they learned in the best of times, or the courage it takes to reclaim their world from the worst of times, are worth the commitment of their lives. These people, the best of ourselves, are legion, and they are everywhere. Next slide. That's why I named this slide "Look for the First Responders." I've forgotten how that became so popular, but somebody said that they remembered their parents teaching them that in the face of a crisis, always look for the first responders. Oh, Mr. Rogers, yay, la la, thank you. It was Mr. Rogers who said that. Well, that's what she's talking about. Joan Chittister says, look around, there are all these people who are responding. I mean, we've heard from them on this screen tonight. I love the fact that so many of the people on this screen have been volunteers, have been poll watchers, have been working behind the scenes on political campaigns. It's just stunning, so energizing for me. It is the unwavering faith, the open hearts, the piercing courage of people from every level of every society that carries us through every major social breakdown to the emergence again of a humanization of humanity. And I think that's a beautiful description of what we've been experiencing in our culture and in our politics, is a major social breakdown and an emergence into a new humanization of humanity. These unsung mighty voices of community, of high-mindedness, of deep resolve, they are the prophets of each era. These are the people who understand that love is the center, is the axle, is the standard of everything the faithful do in the midst of the storm of change. And change, as a storm, engulfs every one of us as we move forward. Her newest book is The Time Is Now. Next slide. It's a call to uncommon courage. And so She says that we are really called to a new world community. And I hope that those of you who've been with us on Wednesday nights hear a resonance with Elia Delio quoting Teilhard de Chardin about his word. Now, Chardin, we all criticize Chardin for creating these really crazy words, but one of them is planetization. And by that, he means this new world community. And the whole business of waking every morning, recommitting yourselves to obedience and submission and to letting go of everything but God's love, or God's will, which is love for the world. I think I'll just leave that slide for you all to savor another time, because I want a little more time in our breakout rooms. So next slide. Here's where we get Brother Parker Palmer, which somebody was very glad that we're going to go to. He is so consistent about the heart is where everything begins. I loved this quote with the leaves, the autumn leaves. The heart's alchemy can turn suffering into community, conflict into the energy of creativity, and tension into an opening toward the common good. And before we even leave that graphic and go to the typed out stuff, let me just remind you all that one of the resources of these classes is the center called Heart Math. And it's a group of people with a marvelous website that talk about coherence. When the mind and the heart and the body and the emotions all line up and are in coherence, then I think it's 8 feet out. Somebody who can come into that force field can feel that and begin to line up themselves. Well, Parker Palmer's calling that the heart's alchemy. It is a literally biochemical, electromagnetic force field of energy. And one of the diminishments of our lives right now, when we can't hug one another or be within 8 feet of one another, is that we are depriving ourselves. And so that's why I almost never do anything just over the phone. I want at least the Zoom so I can read facial expressions and body language. But that heart alchemy can turn suffering into community, conflict into energy of creativity, and tension into an opening toward the common good. Now, still before I get over to the type thing, I'm going to remind myself, I am reminding myself of Elaine DiConstanzo's question tonight. Why do we pray for something? Well, I hope I'm not being too superficial here, but prayer is energy. Spirit is energy, and the Holy Spirit is energy. And Einstein and John Cobb and Elia Delio and Teilhard de Chardin, all of them are saying there's no such thing as substance. Everything is energy. That's why it's so easy to critique the creeds, because they talk about of one substance with the Father. It's one energy with God. God is not Father. When we pray, we literally are releasing energy into an environment and toward a person and toward an issue. And there's all this scientific discovery about a person who's not knowing somebody's praying for them and they're being prayed for from somewhere else. There being some change. Nobody understands all of that mystery, but energy impacts us. So, for those of us who want to see democracy survive and thrive, and we are Legion, the heart is where everything begins. Parker Palmer says, that grounded place in each of us where we can overcome fear, rediscover that we are members of one another, and embrace the conflicts that threaten democracy as openings to new life for us and for our nation. Judy Andrews put in this chat about how our being entangled with one another. Entangled is an actual physics discovery about where you can split the most elemental particles and set them spinning in one direction, and then take one and remove it to the other side of the world and make it spin the other direction. That particle that left starts spinning in the other direction. We are all that entangled in one another. Our energy is. Our stories reveal us to each other, no doubt about it, Marilyn. George Griffin, Hebrews 4:16, pray boldly to God. Amen. Of all the tensions we must hold in personal and political life, perhaps the most fundamental and most challenging is standing and acting with hope in the tragic gap, a phrase that Parker Palmer uses that Richard Rohr really loves. On one side of that gap, we see the hard realities of the world, realities that can crush our spirits, defeat our hopes, and I would say crush our bodies and lead us to do the most horrible things to one another. And on the other side of that gap, we see real world possibilities, life as we know it could be because we've seen it that way, or what John Meacham would say, emphasizing Abraham Lincoln, the better angels of our nature. Next paragraph and slide. Here is Parker Palmer, bless his heart. He's not traveling anymore. He's in his 80s. And he's lovely about the human race is having an eternal conversation. And we have a role and a part to play in that conversation. Our engagement, we're more likely to sustain our engagement with tasks that will never end. Doing justice, loving mercy, and calling the beloved community into being. I just want to emphasize this calling the beloved community into being. I'm going to be having a conversation on, I think, next Thursday night. Maybe here Graham can tell us about, sponsored by the Cathedral Bookstore. And we're going to be talking about the beloved community and how everyone has a responsibility to do what they can to call it into being, to energetically, to put our energy into focus with one another, to bring in a new way of being. And Kramer talked before when we were doing check-in about the power of the interfaith participants in our Monday night prayer vigil. I thought that there was a new and different kind of energy because there were people from different faith backgrounds and no faith backgrounds who were together calling forth something new. That's, I think, why I light a candle while I watch the news, is I'm just not receiving that cognitively. I want to receive that spiritually and pray my energy out on everything in the news hour that's breaking my heart that Judy Woodruff tells us about. Next slide. So Joan Chittister says that we're at a crossover moment. And I think she's right. And that there she goes with Richard Rohr and Arundhati Roy and Oprah Winfrey and all of these other people who are saying we are, is it next Thursday night and the following Thursday night? Conversations with priests. Okay, the Cathedral Bookstore has the information. I don't know when I'm up. I'm having a conversation with Kim Jackson and Thee Smith. I'm up for 2 Thursday nights, I think, in November. Anyway, back to Sister Joan Chittister. As a people, we are at a crossroads moment. It's a call to all of us to be our best, our least superficial, our most serious about what it means to be a Christian as well as a citizen. Before we leave that paragraph, that sentence, I just want to say that my question for our breakout group tonight is going to relate to that. I think it's going to be important for us to say to one another, what is disorienting, what has been disorienting about election night, in the old sense of the word, where we had one election night. We no longer have just one election night, thank God. And to what are you feeling called as we cross over the bridge of the election into the next chapter? Not just of our country, but of the world. Well, we had that picture of those children hugging the broken world. It's really clear that we are in one planetary community. So we're in the midst of all this polarization and national disunity. Is even the hope of wanting. Now, this is a verb from Julian of Norwich. Bob Wicker just put the website link for the conversations coming up. This is taken from the academic journal of the Center for Contemplation and Action in Albuquerque. It's called wanting. It's from that word that Julian of Norwich invented. It is what we are called to be doing, and that is oneifying or wanting the world and not degrading it or not tearing it apart. What is our call in the face of whatever surprised you? You know, we were told there was going to be a red wave, and then we were told there was going to be a blue wave. People were competing with all of that it was going to be a decisive thing that happened in 24 hours of Tuesday. Someone sent me, a tweet I received from David Brooks, quoting Charles Blow, saying how deeply disturbed he was that a larger percentage of Black men and Black women voted for Trump. There are surprises, I think, for all of us in all of this. And one may be that to discover again that our country is as divided as it is. Nevertheless, one of my favorite words. What's beckoning, inviting you to the wanting process? I like this paragraph, even the ghost of an answer makes serious spiritual demands on us all. To heal such division means that we are obliged to search out and identify our own personal value system. It requires us to admit to ourselves what it is that really drives our individual social decisions, our votes, our political alliances. Is it the need to look powerful? Is it the desire for personal control? I would also offer the other two of the three temptations Jesus had in the wilderness. One was to power, one was to possessions, and one was to prestige. And I've heard people talk about each of the three to justify their vote. And Sister Joan is saying, do we have the courage to confront the debased with the ideal, even in the face of ridicule and recrimination? Or is cowardice our secret spiritual sickness? In that case, our national health can only get worse. Next slide. What we're called to is to have one heart for the world at large. We must make love one another as I have loved you, the foundation of national respect, the standard of our national discernment, the bedrock of both our personal relationships and a civilized society. To be one, we don't need one party, one program, one set of policies. What could be duller, more stagnant, more destructive of the soulfulness it takes to create and preserve the best of the human enterprise than such a narrow-minded view of planetary life? What we need is one heart for the world at large. In Alsace, Pasadena, we frequently spoke about many minds, one heart. And I think that's probably the way it is supposed to be, that we all have one heart, but by God, we all are supposed to have a differentiated perspective and find the harmony in it with the one heart. A single-minded commitment to this more perfect union and one national soul, large enough to listen to one another for the sake of the planet. I love that. Large enough to listen to one another for the sake of the planet, for the sake of us all. I had such a breakthrough moment in my prayer hour. About a month ago, I was having an argument with somebody. And when I got down to the stillness of the genuine, a voice came to me saying, the issue is not for you to vanquish that person, but to understand that person. And so frequently we go into an argument wanting to transform the other person rather than understand that person. Next slide. So the goal, this article that Richard Rohr is quoting from, is from this journal, Running, and this particular issue is on politics and religion. So where can we look for winning in the political arena? Only within the confines of our hearts. Politics and government does not exist for itself, and if it does, that's precisely when it becomes at least death-dealing, if not entirely evil. In the end, politics is nothing more than an instrument of social good and human development. It is meant to be the right arm of those whose souls have melted into God. Another way to put that would be souls who live with God consciousness. It occurred to me last week that my hour of prayer is going to have a meeting with God, and that after I come out of that prayer, the idea is to stay in the meeting all day long. And whenever I get perturbed, annoyed, angry, scared, am I going to leave the meeting or stay in the meeting with God or with love or with big love all day long? Stay in the meeting that gets set up in your contemplative practice. Don't let anything get you out of the meeting. Okay, I think that's the last slide. So let's come back up, everybody. So we're going to go into our groups, and we are going to stay in our groups tonight for 15 minutes, please. No, I'm sorry, 12 minutes. And the idea is please just share with one another what spoke to you. It may have been about internal or external virtue. It may have been about energy. It may have been about your needing to heal. It may have been about your exhaustion. It may have been about you're looking around for the first responders. It may have been about being on a bridge to a new chapter. Whatever it was, please share that with your group tonight. And then let's come back at like 22 after, and that gives us 11 minutes, and report back in. So Wesley, if you'll send us into groups of 4, please, friend.